This is the Page Publishing Book Club. I love that bass line. Good evening. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini, along with my engineer, Rob Barrett. How you doing, Rob? Oh, my gosh. He is getting down over there because he's very excited, you know. It's a very special night for the Page Publishing Book Club. It's actually a Page-a-palooza. We have two shows tonight, not just one, two. Two shows in one night. The one you're listening to now, and our regularly scheduled show at midnight. And by the time it's all over, our heads may explode. We have so much information to share with you. Our author wannabes who tune in to find out the process other first-time authors went through so you can get the job done yourself. So strap yourself in and listen up. Enjoy the ride, okay? Ever heard of the Nephilim factor? Well, you will now. That's the name of the book written by Donald Cope. Donald, are these beings we should know about?
Yes, they are. But they're beings that very few people have ever heard of.
And why is that?
Well, I think the thing is that the Nephilim were outlined in a very, very brief verse in Genesis 6. And the verse talks about the Nephilim being the offspring of what they call the sons of God and the women of men. In other words, the sons of God were angels. And most people know the story of Genesis, but when they read past that verse, they just overlook it, or they go, what in the world was that all about? And they move on because it's a very, very brief verse. And this verse claims that these were the heroes of old, the men of renown. They were the first superheroes.
You frame this story. A guy's driving, he has a car accident, and he's kind of transported into another world.
Yes. First, Joe is about as normal of a guy as you could possibly have. And Joe has this life where he commutes every week from Atlanta to Boston, and he's headed in a rainstorm, and he sees a car over in the water, and he hears people shouting, and he goes and tries to save the family that's drowning. And he does save them, and then he gets transported to this other world. Joe, like all of us, has a million questions about how things work. And he has a host angel named Francisco that patiently explains what's going on of all of his questions, the answers to all of his questions. His biggest question is, why is there so much evil in the world? And the answer to why some of the extreme evil occurs on Earth is the story of the Nephilim. And the story is really about how angels ask for free will, were granted free will, went to Earth for a fertility excursion, impregnated human women, and the result of that fertility excursion were the production of many, many Nephilim throughout the world. The Nephilim had special characteristics. So Joe goes through this journey of learning about how this occurred, who the women were that had these Nephilim, who the Nephilim became, what their powers were, and essentially how they became evil. Biblical scholars, they believe that the Nephilim were so evil that when the great flood came to destroy the earth, that God's intent wasn't to destroy man, but rather was trying to destroy the impact of the Nephilim. This tells the entire story from beginning to end about who these Nephilim were, and then ultimately there's a scientific explanation at the end on how Nephilim still impact our lives today.
A scientific explanation.
Absolutely.
Interesting stuff, Donald, who, by the way, is a pharmaceutical executive for 31 years, who decided to research this in his newly found free time. Now, he ties this to Klinefelter syndrome, which involves an extra chromosome, and that chromosome has been found in serial killers and some of the most evil people on Earth. Doesn't mean if you have it that you'll be an evil person, but I thought that was interesting, Rob. Stop laughing at me. We turn now to Jack Imber and the Ravages of War, detailed in his book entitled Deminer, as in explosive devices left behind after a conflict and who suffers as a result of that. So we could be talking about so many places, right, Jack? Iran, Iraq, Vietnam.
It could be so many places. So when you find out where it is, it can be there too. It's based on the fact that in every conflict, in every situation of war, there is civilians that get injured and killed along the way. As a matter of fact, 95% of all casualties of armed conflicts are civilian, and it's huge. So nobody really thinks about that. They're always thinking about, here comes the veterans back from war, thank you for your service, and let's forget about it. And then you've got all this unexploded ordnance contamination after the fact. You've got landmines, booby traps, cluster bombs, live bombs that didn't go off initially, and it's left over in the conflicted country, so that the people living there, they've got a long ways to go before they can get back to normal, if ever.
How do you know all this?
It's my job. I do tons and tons of research. I'm a safety educator in this field. It's my passion, as you can tell.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of Princess Diana.
Mm-hmm. That's really the only cornerstone that Americans have to judge from, because, our media is sorely lacking in what goes on in the world. And our country really, we don't like to think about responsibility of war accountability issues. We just don't. So this book kind of brings into focus, this is a reality in the world, even though this is a fictional story. And by becoming attached and respectful of the characters, you're kind of drawn into their world in a really brief sense, but you're really tied into the emotion of all of it. So that was my motivation, and I think it's been accomplished from what I hear. I haven't heard one negative comment. My sister, after reading the first chapter, she says, well, maybe this should go to religious bookstores or something like this, because, the first chapter is very spiritual and is important to introduce the main character, which is a guardian angel. But as you get past all that, you realize, he's just one of a pack of characters, and this is the way to introduce him and his philosophies and all this.
So you wrote this hoping to educate us through a story. It's interesting, on the Jersey Shore, they started digging up to redo the beaches.
Yep.
And they found, do you remember that? And they found all of these
I know.
unexploded devices. So,
and where did they come from, do you think?
I think they came from, they were sunk out at sea.
In the past, there was, World War II, World War I, there was some accidents on ships that blew up ammunition ships, and these got into the ocean. Here's the thing. When you mention education, part of education, our responsibility is to get people to think. Not to tell them what to think, but just to say, there's a whole world out there. And then from there, stimulate people to research on their own and just become involved and educated about this stuff. I wrote it in such a way that any age group could glean something from it, but at the same time enjoy it and walk away thinking, there's hope. You know what I mean? Not just to spell out a bunch of gloom and doom, but to say, as people, we can really do anything when we get together and put our minds to it. We really can, and solve these problems.
Hope springs eternal, Jack. Thanks so much. Our next author, Judy Meltzer, has worked with special ed kids for decades, and now she's an elementary school principal who thought the time was right to write about a teenager with Asperger's. Why is that, Judy?
I wrote specifically about an Asperger's child to show that children have numerous gifts. And I don't particularly like when we label a child as X, Y, or Z. And certainly I've seen kids who are presumably Asperger's on the spectrum be very successful later on as adults. So, we have to tolerate and understand each child individually, each person individually, each adult individually. Of course, we have a lot of talents, and we're all very, very different. And I've seen incredible success stories on various children that are regarded as different.
Well, Asperger's, you can be functional
Correct.
on so many levels.
Correct. It's a new concept. It didn't exist when I started in the field in the 60s.
So this is an attempt to help us better understand Asperger's?
and to better understand the world of children and adults and relationships. The catalyst for this is a combination between my son and myself, he being very involved with basketball and me being involved with children and adults. And we started to discuss various, quote, cases, and we said, gee, basketball is a very good medium as an equalizer of peer groups of children and of working together and seeing how basketball can help or harm children. And we brought into the mix the whole Asperger's concept, because certainly as we speak, we have a special education piece in our school. I've seen numerous Asperger's spectrum kids.
Okay, so your son plays basketball.
Yes.
And he has seen how that can be a uniting force with
Very
kids.
much so. And an interest, a high interest in something, whether it be basketball, other sports. And so when you read the book, you see how JJ is obsessed with basketball, knows everything about basketball, and that's his hook into the world of kids.
This book, ultimately, it's about a dream that he has.
Which is certainly fulfilled, and we'll see what his future is.
Well, and for some reason, you felt the time was now to write this book.
Because, the time was now because people are very much engaged with the whole idea of autism and Asperger's, and there is tremendous hope with children if approached correctly. The parents of JJ's parents are incredibly supportive. So it's an attempt to look at kids individually and to see how harmful the peer group on occasion can be. Introduce social media into the mix, it could be devastating. And, trying to help children. And hopefully this book shows that their children can be very harmful and children can be wonderful.
Yeah.
Or what we teach them.
JJ's adventure, by the way, continues in book 2. And as Judy says, he has a dream, and we'll find out how he realizes it. Casey Weidenfeld was a tough one to track down. Boy, she's a golfer. She plays in tournaments, goes to school, and in her spare time, she writes. The Golden Flares is the name of her book. And just for starters, Casey, how old are you?
I'm actually 12 years old.
And you wrote your first book.
I did.
And what made you decide to get a book published at 12 years old?
Well, I just wanted it to be shared with the world. I wanted everyone to know about it, so I wanted it published.
Well, tell me, what's it about?
Well, it's about this girl who's, fighting against society, and, she's poor and has no family, and she, wants to, make the poor happy, and then, a rich kid meets her, and it's not based on, anyone I know. It's just, I created it, completely, fantasy.
What do you mean, fantasy?
I kind of, dreamt about it, the plot and stuff. So, and then I asked my teacher if she thought it was a good idea, and she said, just write it.
I guess you're a pretty good writer, huh?
I think so. I do love writing.
The blurb that they wrote about it, it says, once you start running from your fears, you never stop.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about Fallon and Asher and...
Okay, well, Asher's brother has just gotten killed, and he thinks it's Fallon, so he goes after her. But, she didn't do it. So, and no one knows what Fallon looks like, so he has no clue who Fallon is. He's just, blindly looking for her.
Now, have other people read this besides your teacher?
Yes. A few of my friends read it, and, a few of my mom's friends read it, and one of my aunt's clients read it, and they all loved it. Actually, my mom's friend published a book from Page Publishing, and said, well, you could use Page Publishing and use the same, person I did. So I loved it. Very happy.
And you're doing book signings at your golf tournaments?
Mm-hmm. We discussed it with, say, the board of one of the golf tours, and they said, I could do a book signing. And then also I'm going to do a book signing at my hair salon. So
that's the way to do it. How long have you been golfing?
About 6 years now.
So you were 6 when you picked up your first club.
Yeah.
And now you're a published author.
Yes.
What's your greatest hope?
It becomes like a bestseller and then it becomes a movie. That would be like amazing.
What advice do you have?
Just go with the flow and let the words pour out of you and don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do.
All right, Casey, let those words pour out and follow your heart. I like that. I think that's what she's saying. Mark Washer followed his heart when he wrote everything on it, no missing Perseus, the world's best erotic comedy trilogy. Mark, Perseus? What do you make up your own words?
Well, sure. Doesn't everybody? It's an erotic comedy about a sentient beings who realize that we're going to destroy them when we destroy our own world. So they materialize themselves into our world to prevent our mutual destruction. So it's heavy science fiction, but the story mainly focuses on the relationships of the people in it, on the adventure of saving the world.
They're on an adventure of saving the world.
Yeah. It's kind of like I Dream of Jeannie with sex, heavily. It's kind of told in a Monty Python-style fashion, real loose narrative, real loose dialogue. I've kind of thrown out all the rules of conduct in this.
So have you written before? I mean, is this your first stab?
Well, I've written some children's books for toddlers called Blue Bonnie Butterfly, and I've written some spiritual books for adults called Life Passion. And I've also written for a short story website, and through all that experience, I decided, well, I'm going to try this one. A person another author named J.L. Casey said, I think you could write erotica. Just give it a shot. And I'd always been, kind of leery of doing that, thinking it was beyond my capability, but I found out it comes very easy to me.
Erotica.
Yeah, and the dialogue comes very easy to me as well. 50 Shades of Grey kind of takes you in and out of the bedroom quickly. Well, I have pages of very explicit detail, and I try to keep everything kind and gentle. And, I don't get too vulgar.
What exactly are you trying to accomplish with this book?
One of the things I'm trying to accomplish is an awareness of God. That the Creator is in control of everything that there is. And another thing that I try to make people aware of is we need to all be nice to each other, basically, and that our goal is to create a world that's livable for everyone.
Maybe if we focused more on erotica, this could happen. I mean, how does erotica fit into that?
Without sex, there is no people. So propagation of the species is paramount. Sally is the heroine in this story, and her goal is to create a being that has roots from both sides, meaning roots from the ether, where she comes from, and then roots from Earth. And the mate she chooses, Troy, fulfills that role. And so she thinks that by combining these two species, she can create a being that will come to show the people of Earth how to, live after that. And she runs into a lot of trouble with our culture trying to fulfill her goal. And it's a trilogy. So I'm thinking that once I get the second one in print, then I'll really start to hit the marketing hard. There's I call it a shuffle factor. And when people read this stuff that I've written, they'll actually squirm in their seat, stop reading, look around to see who's watching, and then start reading it again. So I'm thinking, okay, that's working, definitely. I definitely get a physical reaction when people read it.
All right, Mark, I'm going to recap. This book is I Dream of Jeannie with sex, told in the style of Monty Python with a shuffle factor, or I guess you could say a squirm factor, right? It'll be interesting to see how this works out for you. You hear that? I hear it. You know what that means. We got to take a quick break. And when we come back, we have some stories for vampire lovers writing about the living dead. Grab a snack and come right back. This is a special edition of the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you. Printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
Welcome back to the Page Publishing Book Club Marathon. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. We are doing two big shows tonight. A Page-a-palooza, I tell ya. Before the break, we told you about our vampire writers, and they are coming up. But first, check out Charles Laurie. He knew he was related to a famous French military leader, but to trace his roots, he traveled all over Europe to write his book entitled My Life in America. Charles, tell us what happened after you returned from your travels with all of this information that you gathered about your family tree.
So what I did was I took an encyclopedia of Napoleon Bonaparte information and consolidated it all into my book, which has the highlights, which has the achievements, the blunders, the players, who's who, when, the dates, and the events, and the achievements and the blunders. I mean, I didn't hide anything. I wasn't quite. I kind of like made a human being out of Napoleon Bonaparte. Sure, he had a blunder at the end of it, but he was put together. He was set up by England. He inherited that war. Napoleon Bonaparte didn't initiate the war with England. France was hating England. He inherited it as he rose up the ranks to commander.
You're related to Napoleon, so you did all this research on Napoleon for your book entitled My Life in America.
It's My Life in America by Charles Louis Napoleon Bonaparte VII.
You're Napoleon Bonaparte VII?
Yes.
And your last name is Louis?
My middle name is Louis.
Oh, okay, because I see your last name is Laurie.
Napoleon III, the ruler of the Second Empire, was Charles Louis Napoleon Bonaparte III. And my father gave me his first two names. And then you can't just born a child into this economy, into this world with the name Bonaparte. The kid's going to get picked apart. Change the name to Laurie.
I got to ask you a question. How tall are you?
6 foot.
You're 6 foot? So
5'11". I know Napoleon was a little bit shorter, but my brother's like 5'5".
Oh my
and
gosh.
Napoleon was the second born. Joseph was the firstborn.
Wow.
Napoleon was the second born.
All
My
right.
grandfather, I never met the man. He was born in 1888. He was one of the kingpins of Prohibition. He and Joseph Kennedy were partners. Joseph Kennedy was handling all the booze coming out of England, and my grandfather was handling all the booze coming out of France.
Wow.
So the ships would sail in the same direction to the Bahamas. And there they had trucks where they could unload the booze. And instead of being met by gunfire, they were met by trucks and buckets full of cash. And what they would do is they'd transfer the booze again from the Bahamas to Palm Beach. The Breakers Hotel was the port of call. And all the trucks were waiting for the shipments of booze to come across. And that's when my grandfather was very successful. From what I understand, Joe Kennedy was the only one person that could get close enough to Al Capone to kill him. Jesus. And the feds wanted him dead. So they told my grandfather, they said, you got to tell your partner at the next meeting with Al Capone in Chicago, he's got to take a gun, pull it out from underneath the table, and shoot and kill the son of a bitch.
Oh, my God.
I'm like, oh, my God, no. And when he didn't do that, my grandfather expelled him from Palm Beach and legalized alcohol here in America.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I present Charles Louis Laurie Napoleon Bonaparte VII. Who knew? Who knew there were 7? And this guy's 6 feet tall, whatever. Michael McWilliams is a real lover of American history, and he became interested in a guy named Payoshie, who he describes as a long-haired General Custer because that's what Native Americans called him, right, Michael?
Correct.
So this is a true story. This is some real history we're going to get here.
It's historical fiction, but it's certainly weighted down with lots of history.
Not a great period in American history.
But a lot going on. Hideyoshi referring to George Custer, who was the commander during that the 1876 campaign against the Lakota Sioux up in Montana. And I kind of got hooked into this guy about 6 or 7 years ago, having visited up there a couple of times. And somewhere along the way, I just got the bug, and I was starting to read. And I've read quite a bit about him, the battle, the Indians. And eventually I got to the place I thought I ought to write a book about this. And I didn't want it to be like a history book. I wanted it to be more, what would be the word, immediate, as if this has never happened and it's happening for the first time through this story. And I wanted it to include everything I could think of that it should include, like the horses and the Indian, the myth of the survivor, anything that had anything to do with that episode, I wanted it included. So it took me a while to gather it all and create it like an outline to work from. But once I got the outline done, it went pretty quick. The story is basically picks up, around June the 14th, 1876, with a scout detachment commanded by a Major Reno looking for the Indians in the valley of the Tongue River, which he did not find. And as the story moves on through his reconnaissance, he gets back to where the main forces of the cavalry are, commanded by General Terry, and General Custer is a member of that command. And from there, the story goes into how they're going to do it, where the Indians must be, and then General Terry comes to a decision that Custer will lead his regiment in an effort to locate the Indians, and if he finds that they have gone somewhere else, he's free to pursue them. So, and the story goes that Custer did find the Indian camp, which was a singular military feat of that time, to have gotten that close to an Indian village, because usually they'd be miles gone before you ever got anywhere near them. So he found it, and the story basically from there goes into the battle and what happened. And in the text of all of it is a impression of my own about what really happened and how it happened. So it's not war and peace. There's a whole lot of war and not much peace.
Well, there wasn't much peace at that time.
I think it's a book that just about anybody could enjoy. If you like war novels, if you like history, if you like cowboys and Indians, if you like horses, I think there's something about it that would appeal to everybody at a level or another. And if you didn't know the story, you'll certainly get a good grasp of Custer's last stand on steroids.
Okay, got it. Custer's last stand on steroids. Good one, Michael. And a lot to tackle, I gotta say, for a first book. Our next author, Don Lane, wrote a book about running a business during Prohibition. It's called Liquid Mail. So, Don, this is based on stories told you by two brothers before they died who actually ran a business during Prohibition.
I'd say almost everything in that book happened. I'd say 80% of it did.
What'd you do, take notes?
Yeah. Now, and then I didn't know to write the book for years. I didn't think about it. And I thought, well, I'm going to try. And it took a little over a year. Then the name of it was Liquid Mail. I asked John one day just how much he ran across that lake for 10 years they ran. He said none. I was yelling at him, said, hey, you come to my house and we're talking now. How much did you run? He said none, but I did deliver a lot of liquid mail. He would never call it whiskey or alcohol. He just called it liquid mail.
That's very funny.
I've seen a few stories and stuff read, but they only just slightly mention the Prohibition. They don't actually talk about what the guys went through and how they ran it as a business. And it's just been lightly touched. It was never touched on before, so that's why I decided to do it that way and write about the business end of it.
How many years has it been since they related this story to you?
Well, they were in their late 80s, and let's see.
It's about 35 years ago.
Yeah, 35, 40 years ago, yeah.
They told you the story 35 or 40 years ago.
Yeah.
What?
And I took notes on them, but I wasn't planning on writing a book. And I just got talking with my granddaughters. They asked me, said, Grandpa, could you write a book? I said, well, yeah, anybody can. So I just had to write a book. And I just used all the notes that I took when they would talk to me.
And they made it through Prohibition alive. They didn't get arrested.
Yeah. No.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but now in the story, I had one of them get killed. But to make it a story,
Oh, okay.
he got shot out there by the Coast Guard chasing it.
How you publicizing this book?
No, I'm just selling it here in my shop. I'm a barber.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so I've had people come back and tell me that they really liked it. And I had a couple people come back and they liked it so much, so they got all their neighbors to give them money so they could get a copy.
All right, so Liquid Mail is available now at Don Lane's Barber Shop in Port Clinton, Ohio. Get out there and pick up a copy today. This is what we call doing it for love. All right, vampire fans, your turn. Jacqueline Anderson wrote Dark Moon Saga Crimson Book 1, and she admits the Twilight books inspired her just a little. Tell us about your main character, Celine.
It is about her transformation into a vampire, and after she transforms, she discovers that no one from her human life remembers she exists. It's as if she's been wiped off the face of existence. And absolutely furious, she decides she's going to figure out a way to desensitize herself to the vampire weaknesses so that she can go after the one who turned her.
Have you always written?
Oh, yes. Even before I wrote, I just made up stories. I've always been a storyteller. And I started writing in elementary school when we would have story assignments. We'd have to write a story. And then when I got into middle school and I had 20, 25, 30 vocabulary words, we would have to write a story with all of those words inside it somewhere. Crimson Moon I started writing in September of 2008, which it didn't take me that long to write Crimson Moon. It was done before the middle of 2009, but it's just taken this long to get several of them done because I wanted to get close to the whole saga finished so that they would have their continuity. And if I thought of something in the later books that I wanted to change in an earlier one, I could still go back and do that.
Nice.
I've had a book signing at a local library here in Portland, Tennessee, and another one in Shelbyville, Tennessee, which is where a humongous chunk of my family lives.
Can you give some advice to authors of first-time books on how they can get the word out?
A really good thing to do first is, after you've written your first draft, pick a couple of family members and 2 or 3 friends that you trust that you know are not going to take it and run, and let them read it. Get their feedback, see what they think. And if they really like it, then they can tell other people so that before you ever go to get it published, people already know about you and that thing you've written, and they hear that it's good. So by the time you get it published, the people who have heard about it through your family and friends are eager enough to read it just because they've heard it's good.
How many books altogether are you going to write?
The Dark Moon Saga has 5. The 5th one is actually a prequel. So where the others are 1, 2, 3, and 4, the prequel will be book 0.
Okay. All through Page, huh?
That's right. I love Page Publishing. It was much smoother working through them than I thought it would be because I've heard other publishing companies are complicated to work with. You have a next to nothing chance of them choosing to publish your book, or when you sell books through them, you don't get a very big percentage. I just happened to see a commercial on TV about Page Publishing, and it caught my interest. So I decided to check things out, and I've never seen that commercial since.
Oh, okay, that's good. Saw one Page commercial, and you were sold. Thanks for that endorsement, Jacqueline. It doesn't get any better than that. Next vampire fan up is Amanda Alberry, a stay-at-home mom who just loves to write about vampires. Her book is entitled Soulbound, Destiny's Move, the first in a trilogy, and she hopes to give readers a new perspective on vampires, werewolves, and creatures of the night. How so, Amanda?
Well, they're from a world called Cardon, and it's a story about their integration with our world in a war that's waged for almost a millennium.
Were you inspired by Twilight, True Blood, or did you have a personal experience with a vampire?
I've just always loved vampires since I was a young girl. I guess I was around 11 years old when I experienced my first vampire show and my first vampire book. Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice.
It's like the greatest vampire story of all time.
Oh, I love that story. I just love vampires, thanks to her. Started doing things on my own with it, with my own take on vampires and werewolves and shapeshifters, all of it. Since I was a little girl, I've kind of written my own stories, my own little... It could be anything from vampires to fairies. I just love the fantasy genre. So vampires are my number one favorite.
Now, Olivia Ryan is your main character, right?
Yes.
And she lives in the Appalachian Mountains.
I live in the Appalachian Mountains.
So she starts having dreams.
Yes.
And that's when the story kind of takes off.
Yes.
How long ago did you write this?
I wrote the book, I guess, about 3 years ago. I tried a couple of times with different publishers, and then I decided I'm just going to give it just a little bit more time. And when I get it published, the time will feel right. Well, I submitted to Page Publishing, and my book is now available on the market for all to read.
Good for you, Amanda. Quite the accomplishment, especially with the 2 little ones under 5 at home. Timothy Dawson has always been a fanatic about vampire novels. In fact, when he was a kid, his friends used to call him Wolfman. He came up with the concept of a cross between a vampire and a werewolf and wrote a book entitled The Life of a Hybrid. Where does your story take place, Timothy?
Decided to keep it towards like medieval warfare, considering that I've also always had a fascination with medieval time frames. Like all the vampire novels and stuff that I've read, none of them really seem to capture that backdraft of the story. It was all centered in modern time, like with the Dracula novels and stuff like that. It's more about vampires attacking humans as opposed to the backdraft of what would be a vampire's first enemy, which would be a werewolf. So I provided the backstory for that war, but I'm trying to make it so that it seems like it's happening around normal, everyday people without them even knowing it.
We should get the feeling that they could be anywhere. They could be with us right now.
Yeah. The main character's name is Drake Tanis, and he is basically the great-grandson of the very first vampire. So he's already got the blood of the vampire running through him. And in the beginning of the book, he meets an unknown figure in a clearing in the woods and is attacked, but he has no recollection of who this figure is or what has actually happened to him after the incident actually happens. So when he goes back to his home village, he's actually exiled because people back then naturally fear the things that they don't understand. And after that, the story just kind of, it falls into place to where he's actually learning more about himself as well as what is expected of him and what his limits and his strengths are in the process, trying to learn about what actually happened to him. The thing that sets mine apart is it's set in a totally different time that most people now have long forgotten. It's a dead era, time when honor was actually still present in warfare, where 2 armies faced off, quite literally face to face, as opposed to attacking each other from miles away. And I think that is a part of human history that should be remembered, because that's where we all came from. Everyone always told me that I'd make an excellent reader and stuff, but no one's ever actually given me the idea to actually write a book. I started writing the book initially as a hobby when I was in Job Corps, just as a ventilation source for all my thoughts and stuff like that. And eventually it just started to get longer and longer. And then the editation process and the proofreading and everything. And after 9 separate copies, I finally created the novel The Life of a Hybrid.
9 separate copies. Can you imagine that? 9 separate drafts? That's a lot of work, Timothy. Rachel Haig did not write about vampires. She started writing a book in high school about a secret society buried deep inside a Colorado mountain where a guy named Luke and his brothers lived. Now, 4 years later, she's published it. So what happens in this secret society, Rachel?
There are people who are trained to keep the balance of the world behind the nation's backs. Like, the nations of the world don't know that they exist, but they do small things here and there just to kind of tilt the tables and keep one nation from growing too large or too powerful over the other nation. But the problem exists when certain people within their own group decide that they don't agree with the morals or the principles of the group anymore and split off and start fighting each other. So the villain aspect is themselves. They're fighting their neighbors, their friends, just people that they've known their entire lives that have just decided to go away from the traditional view of things.
And some of the kids that lived there were kidnapped and held prisoner by a group of people who wore cloaks and hoods and kept their faces hidden.
Part of the uniform of they're called by like the American people that might have heard of them. They're always been a myth. They're called Watchers, and all of the Watchers, their uniform is hoods. So when it's talking about the hoods, it's actually talking about all of the different people. However, the people that have sort of split away from the traditional view of things, they have been kidnapping children and hiding them in another location. And so when Brian is found by that nation, Luke has no idea who he is. So Brian wakes up and claims that he's been kidnapped, and he's been kidnapped by Luke's people. Luke has no idea what he's talking about because he's always been agreeing with the traditional view of things. There's no idea that there's even been a split taking place around him.
What are you hoping for this book? What do you want people to get out of this?
Well, in the book itself, I have put in little places, as you read along the book, of the focus is mainly towards teens and young adults, and I put in different places where their situations are relatable to people just in everyday life. There's different things like unplanned pregnancies, and there's stuff like suicides or attempted suicides and stuff like that, where people can relate to these events as well. I think the main thing that I'm wanting to get across is that you're not alone. There are people like you that are in situations that need help. Even like there's situations might be more extreme, but these are still issues that people face. And also that it's kind of an illustration of how a person can go from what is good to transitioning to something that is evil, and it's how it's a slow progression over time, and how a person needs to be careful that they don't fall into these little traps and slowly turn into something they would find to be horrible.
All right, Rachel, very good. Let's go south to Atlanta now, where Robin Turner is standing by. She wrote They Dream in Darkness. And Robin, I got to tell you, the description that I'm reading about your book is ominous. You know, it starts out 5 years old. Anna lost it all. Her mom, her freedom, her virginity.
Everything, yeah.
At 5?
She was kidnapped. At 5, yes, kidnapped. Yeah, she was raped and molested. And by the time she was 9 years old, she had her first STD.
Do you know this woman, this little girl?
I do know her. It's based off of a true story, yes. I met her later on in life. We were volunteering at a food bank. It's kind of crazy because we were working there. I'd seen her and I was kind of talking to her, and she seemed a little down. She was very withdrawn and whatnot. And I was just talking to her and just talking to her about things. And she was going through some stuff, and she told me that her cancer had come back and she wasn't sure what she needed to do. And I was like, well, just take my phone number down. And, if you need me, anything, just reach out to me. Well, she never reached out to me. And then one day, the police call me and tell me that she had a seizure on the MARTA bus or the MARTA train, and my phone number was one of the only numbers in her phone.
Oh.
And it just kind of started from there.
So she didn't have a lot of friends.
No, she didn't have a lot of friends. She knew people, but she's very quiet and kind of keeps to herself. And at the time, her daughter didn't have a cell phone.
Did you play a role in helping this woman get back on track?
I did.
They Dream in Darkness. Why that title?
Yes. Well, I'm thinking, when I was thinking about her, and I was thinking about her dreams, because the last time she saw her birth mother, she was kidnapped. The last time she saw her birth mother made her promise, her and her siblings, that they would graduate from high school and they would graduate from college. And that has always been a dream for Anna, for her to just graduate. When she was born, the doctors told her that she would never amount to anything. They said that she wouldn't live past the age of 6, and if she did, she'd be mentally retarded and all these other things. So she was a preemie. I think she was a couple of pounds when she was born. So that was her dream, to graduate. And it was in the midst of all of this darkness that was going on in her life. And then also with that, the people that had been mean to her and tried to capture her, that tormented her and did all of those things, they also had dreams too. But their dreams were veiled in darkness as well. All the bad things that they did to Anna. They stole her identity. They rounded up a whole bunch of credit card debt on her behalf while she was in the hospital. She's had cancer like 11 times. So they just preyed on her.
It's so cruel what we do to people.
It is. And the thing is that people don't realize what they do, how they affect people with the things that they do and the things that they say. And I always think about Michael Jackson. You know, God bless Michael Jackson. But his dad used to always call him Big Nose, Big Nose, Big Nose. His dad probably didn't even think Joe probably didn't think anything about it, you know, just teasing. And then Michael Jackson got all this surgery on his nose, and his nose ultimately fell off from all of the surgeries that he had. I never thought that I would be a writer, a published author. But people said to me, Robin, you need to write this book. Her story, Anna's story, needs to get out. People need to know this so that they can have a sense of there's hope out there. You just got to hang on. You just have to hang on and just stay strong.
Any advice to aspiring authors?
Don't get complacent. Always write. Write every day. Even if it's a paragraph, even if it's a page, even if it's just a sentence, you should be writing every single day. Even if it's not about the book that you're writing, just write every day.
All right, Robin. Write every single day. Good advice. We're going to switch gears a little now and talk about spirituality. Raneem Khayali wrote Life's Greatest Mystery. And Raneem, you call this a whole new way to look at spirituality?
Spirituality, it's actually something that it's been around for quite some time now. And I personally came to it because it's just, it's a moment of enlightenment. It's something within you. Spirituality, in my opinion, it's something self-taught. It's like a spark of light that you see throughout your lifetime. And then it comes to a point in your life, if, you know, do you want to reach for that light and see where it takes you, or do you just want to ignore it and move on with your life? It begins the moment that you start to have more questions than you have answers.
It's like the older I get, the less I know. The more questions I have, the more I don't understand.
Right. So spirituality is all about trying to find the answers. It's a variety of beliefs. You can't find just one answer that will satisfy everything in your heart. You have to keep looking and searching until you are fulfilled within your heart, until you find all the answers that will satisfy you.
Is this the story of your journey?
In a way, yes, because I did write personal spiritual writings, you know, my personal journey and how I went through my spiritual journey. You know, spirituality, it changes you. It changes the way you look at life, the way you look at yourself. And it's definitely not an easy thing to take in and to accept. So my best advice would be to just try and open your heart to love and try to allow new things, new ideas into your heart and mind and soul, and see where it takes you in life, because you'd be surprised how deep love truly is, and You know, we are so taken by love on the surface and how beautiful it is that we don't know that within its depth, there's so much more to love than we can even imagine. It's definitely something very beautiful, and my whole point is to just try and share that love and beauty with everyone else.
All right. And you can find Raneem's videos on YouTube. While we're talking about spirituality, Esmeralda Cruz wrote a book called God is Calling. And you mean that literally, right, Esmeralda?
Right.
And you say that it conveys a very significant message of salvation, not just for people, but for the entire United States of America and nations around the world.
That's correct.
You say you received a revelation from God?
Well, I received a dream first, and 3 months later I had an encounter with the Holy Spirit, which brought me to more information, and it all led me to, realize that God was placing a calling on my life and wanting me to write this book and to reveal all the information that he had been showing me. He showed me many things, which I write about in the book. One that was very, pertinent to all of this is the fact that he's using my mother as a sign of warning. And I came to learn that he actually uses people as signs of warning before he sends judgment to a nation that has rebelled against him. My mother actually died on 9/11. So he's using that as a marker to show that, she is a sign, and that judgment is coming, because he does that when a nation rebels against him and turns completely away from him, which is what this country has done in the last, few decades, but especially in the last decade has been the worst. This is what he does. And so my effort, in writing the book is to help warn the nation that judgment is coming. And, this is a sabbatical year. He's pointing to the month of September, ending. He's showing us the blood moons. There's something that's very significant. I talk about it briefly in the book.
Esmeralda, I interview a lot of authors, and there's been many books written on this. Many books over the ages that, the time is short, the time is near, we have to turn away from our sins, Judgment Day is coming, dates have been thrown out there. What sets you apart from so many others? I'm sure you know that.
Actually, I didn't. I wasn't as informed as I am now. What sets me apart is the fact that I didn't know any of this. I didn't know anything. What I have learned now, I learned because God revealed all this to me. He has, drawn me to biblical scripture. He has drawn me to other information. He has given me dreams. He has given me, revelation. This was something that was completely new to me. And had he not revealed all this to me, I would be totally uninformed about it. So the fact that he's chosen someone like me who is not involved in the church, had never written a book. This is my first book, and the only reason I wrote it is because he placed this calling on my life. Had he not done this, I never would have written this book. There was no reason to.
All right, Esmeralda, thanks for sharing your story. And thank you for stopping by the Page Publishing Book Club. Don't touch that dial, because we're coming back in a couple hours, right, Rob? You're coming back, right? You're not going to make me do this alone, right? No, he's coming back. He's coming back to work his magic on that board over there. All right, then I'm coming back. There it is. More stories, more ideas, more information, so you can figure out how you're going to get that first book published and be the next guest on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. See you before you know it, right here on 710 WOR.